Hi there, this is Jo Roberts. Welcome to this podcast entitled Intersex Awareness Day and the US Department of State. This should be a relatively short video, hopefully. It regards an issue that I wanted to talk about, and it relates to something I saw on the website for Interact Advocates, which is an organisation that concerns itself with the equality for intersex people and sort of championing the human rights of intersex people. This podcast is actually going to be discussing something which is quite a few years old, approximately 5 years old. Actually, but I saw it on the Interact Advocates website, which can be found at interactadvocates.org, and I thought it worthy of discussion mainly because it absolutely astonished me. So I'll just get straight to the point. I went onto their website and there was quite a lot written about Intersex Awareness Day. Obviously, I am an intersex person. I was quote-unquote diagnosed as a small child with androgen insensitivity, and that's partly why I was on this website. I look at it from time to time, and I was scrolling down and found something regarding the US Department of State. Now, seemingly they issued a statement a few years back in 2016, but I don't think much has changed since then, so it's still more or less relevant. In fact, it is relevant. There's no more or less about it. It's still relevant, and nothing has changed since then, definitely, where intersex people are concerned, so I can talk about it and it's still relevant. There is a statement on the Interact website from the American Department of State. This is a statement from a guy called John Kirby. I did a sort of brief internet search on him. He is a retired Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. He served as he worked for CNN, so he was also spokesperson for the United States Department of State, and more recently, in 2021, he joined the Pentagon as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. This statement is on the Interact Advocates website, so you can find it there, and a very brief version of it is on that website. But if you want to find a full version of it, it's actually on the US Department of State website under archived content, and I'm going to read the statement and respond to it bit by bit because I was absolutely astonished when I read this. I'll explain why as I go. So it begins: on the occasion of Intersex Awareness Day, the United States stands in solidarity with intersex persons around the world. Well, first off, no it doesn't, because surgeries against intersex people are still being carried out without their consent. So let me clarify. Children as young as 18 months old are still, actually younger, are still being operated on non-consensually in order to make them into something which society considers to be more socially acceptable. So less like an intersex person and more like, at least superficially, what a biological male or biological female would look like. So no, the United States does not stand in solidarity with intersex persons around the world because it's still allowing the extreme abuse of them to happen. It goes on: we recognise that intersex persons face violence, discrimination, stigma, harassment and persecution on account of their sex characteristics which do not fit binary notions of typical male or female bodies. Yes, and the vast overwhelming majority of that violence, discrimination, stigma, harassment and persecution is dished out to us by the medical profession. In fact, in my opinion, all of it is coming from the medical profession. I haven't faced any violence, discrimination, stigma, harassment or persecution from anybody that's not in the medical profession because I'm an intersex person. The reason for that would be that nobody actually talks about it or acknowledges its existence, and none of that discrimination's coming from any direction other than the medical profession, for the most part. Some may disagree with that, I don't know, but it goes on. Intersex persons routinely face forced medical surgeries that are conducted at a young age without free or informed consent. These interventions jeopardise their physical integrity and ability to live free. Yeah, no shit. They don't just jeopardise physical integrity, they jeopardise the psychological and emotional integrity as well, and cause lifelong trauma and a very great deal of suffering. Next, it says, the United States is a proud and founding member of the Equal Rights Coalition, a recently established coalition of 31 governments that aims to strengthen cooperation to advance the human rights of and support inclusive development for all persons regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, and sex characteristics. We hope this coalition will work to share best practices and to jointly address challenges in support of the human rights of intersex persons. Yeah, well, I won't hold my breath. None of that means anything. None of that matters. It's completely tokenistic. It's a totally empty gesture. It means absolutely nothing. Let's cut down to the nitty gritty here. Let's get straight to the point. These surgeries are still being carried out. We still, in the Western world, are living in a society which thinks that it's acceptable to allow doctors to use a scalpel to operate on the bodies of intersex people without their consent. And no amount of coalitions and empty promises and virtue signalling and placation is going to change that. Just end the surgeries. We don't need coalitions. We don't need empty promises and empty gestures and virtue signalling. It's so frustrating. This is so frustrating. It goes on to say, through the Global Equality Fund, the United States, together with the fund's 25 government, foundation and business partners, I can only begin to imagine, are supporting new efforts of the intersex community to mobilise and organise. What do you mean? They act as if they have nothing to do with the fact that these surgeries are being carried out in the first place. This is coming from somebody who at that time was the Assistant Secretary and Department spokesperson for the Bureau of Public Affairs. This isn't just some person. This statement makes it sound as though they have nothing to do with what the outcome is going to be of all of this. There is no need to mobilise and organise. There seems to be a bit of confusion here. So let me just put this in really simple terms. There's no need for mobilising, there's no need for organising, there isn't even any need for activism. Here's a simple, straightforward set of facts for you. Human beings are born with inalienable rights, and bodily integrity is one of those rights. That right is violated by the medical profession where intersex people are concerned. It's also violated where a lot of American males are concerned during their childhood when they have circumcision forced upon them, and it's also violated in other parts of the world where female genital mutilation is concerned. However, where intersex people are concerned, there is no need to mobilise and organise or have activism or anything like that. And it says here, the goals of increasing awareness of and support for intersex persons and their human rights. Yeah, you don't grant us human rights. This is something that really, really needs to be said here. You don't give us human rights. The government doesn't give people human rights. They are inalienable rights. They are natural rights. Humans don't make rights. The right to life, for example, that's not man-made. That's part of natural law. Bodily integrity, the right to go through your life without being assaulted, that's natural. That's naturally occurring. That's an inalienable right. That has nothing to do with government. This notion of intersex activists asking the government to give them something which isn't theirs to give, is just another form of self-hate and self-abuse. It's just another way of denigrating intersex people. Asking somebody to give you something that isn't theirs to give you. You were born with bodily integrity. You were born with the right to not be assaulted. They violated it, end of story. The only responsibility intersex people have is to point out to these individuals that they violated the natural, inalienable rights of intersex people and created enormous amounts of suffering by doing so. It says here that the Global Equality Fund was launched in 2011 to support civil society in their efforts to advance human rights and uphold dignity for all. Again, people are born with certain rights. You can't advance human rights. Like, no human beings, no governments can advance human rights. I was born with the right to bodily integrity. I was born with the right to life. Human beings don't grant those, and you especially don't go asking people that have sanctioned the abuse of intersex people in the first place. You especially don't go asking them to grant you human rights. I already had human rights and they were violated. The non-consensual surgeries carried out on intersex people are state-sanctioned abuse, which is what makes this statement coming from the Assistant Secretary and Department spokesperson for the Bureau of Public Affairs such an overwhelming joke. And he later went on to be the Assistant Secretary of Defence for Public Affairs. The non-consensual surgeries carried out against intersex people are state-sanctioned abuse. And I believe that the decision for that to continue happening comes from very high up. So the final paragraph of this statement says, on Intersex Awareness Day, we are reminded that all people everywhere are created equal. No, they're not, and should be afforded equal dignity and respect regardless of sex characteristics. We look forward to continued cooperation with civil society, like-minded governments and others to advance the human rights. Again, you can't advance human rights. You can't advance rights like the right to life and bodily integrity. We're born with those. You violated them. The medical profession violated them because the state sanctions and has sanctioned the abuse of intersex people because it considers the existence of intersex people, hitherto known as hermaphrodites, as a threat to the social order of things. We're not all created equal in every sense of the word. We all have different skills and abilities. We should all theoretically have equal rights. That's another matter. Of course, we should all have equal rights. But the point is, we're all born with inalienable rights. And if something happens to you, which is if a doctor uses a scalpel to alter your body without your consent when you're still just a small child and can't consent to anything, that's state-sanctioned abuse. And they violated these rights that they keep referring to. I'm not going to ask another human being to give me something that isn't theirs to give me. These people have no authority over me. They have no superiority over me. They have, there isn't even a debate here. So that's the end of the statement, and I'm going to try and summarise this here because it's, I think I've more or less made my point already, but it's the fact that this is coming from an organisation which is a sort of government organisation. I'm not from America, so I don't know exactly how this stuff works, but it says the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour, and then it's got US Department of State. Now that is government. So the problem that I have with this statement is this is the government of America talking about the violation of the inalienable rights of intersex people as if they have nothing to do with that. The whole thing is astonishing. And that was the first reaction or response that I had upon reading this. It was astonishment. I'm sitting reading it thinking, but they're talking about this as though they have nothing to do with it, as if it just happens. I'm not sure what's going on here, whether they're shifting the blame entirely onto the medical profession and saying that the government has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that these surgeries are being carried out on intersex people. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Now, I'm not an expert on American healthcare. I know that people do have to pay for it, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the American government must have something to do with the healthcare system in America. I'm pretty sure that is the case. I mean, I'm not an expert on American politics or anything, but I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that the American government have something to do with the American healthcare system. And this person, this John Francis Kirby, is talking about what happens to intersex people as though that's absolutely nothing to do with the government. There's no accountability in this statement. There's no admission of guilt. He's not saying, well, we've played our part in that. This is state-sanctioned abuse and we're going to do something to end this. None of that. I am sorry, but intersex activists are being, how can I put this? I'm going to try and put this in the nicest way that I possibly can. Firstly, they're being manipulated. The United States government has absolutely no intention whatsoever, if it wasn't already obvious from that statement, of ending non-consensual surgeries against intersex people anytime soon. I should have thought that's perfectly clear from this statement when there isn't even any admission of guilt or wrongdoing, and there isn't even any acknowledgement that the United States government has anything to do with the fact that this was happening in the first place. They act as if the medical profession in America and the United States government are two completely different things which have absolutely nothing to do with each other and have never had any dealings with each other, and that cannot possibly be the case. So those who are working in intersex activism, which I resolutely will not do, and I've already explained why, because I'm not in the business of asking people to give me something that isn't theirs to give. It's insulting and it's degrading, and it's analogous to a black slave during the time of the enslavement of black people asking their master for freedom. You can't ask somebody to give you something that isn't theirs to give. We had those rights and they were violated. There needs to be a different approach, and it's the one that I'm taking right now. Calling them out on their bullshit, exposing them with truth. Don't waste your time with these people. They don't care about intersex people. They don't care about human rights. The system itself is a problem. They don't care about the human rights of anybody. Not intersex people, not trans people, gay people, black people, women, anybody. Don't ask people to give you something that isn't theirs to give. Find another way.